Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
We're about to take a journey back in time. We've got some really interesting source material to guide us.
Yes, excerpts from a document called Whispers Through Time, Historical Evolution, and Key Proponents. It gives a fascinating look at, well, a different way of seeing things.
Absolutely. And our topic is the historical journey of this specific idea, the doctrine of signatures.
Hmm.
Our goal really is to understand how this unique perspective on nature changed over centuries. From these very old intuitions right up to a more formalized system.
It helps to imagine it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Picture a time when people didn't just see nature as, I don't know, random parts.
Right.
They saw it more like a living thing, maybe even a kind of book.
A book written by.
Well, perhaps by a divine hand, depending on the belief system.
Yeah.
And in this book, plants, rocks, everything had these visible signatures.
Signs, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Clues that could tell you about its purpose, its inner nature, maybe even its healing powers. That's the world we're stepping into.
Okay, so let's dig into that. The source material mentions the philosophical foundation for this. It wasn't just plucked from thin air.
No, definitely not. It points to this really ancient concept of a living cosmos, everything interconnected.
Interconnected.
Like a sort of sympathetic vibration between things, a vast network where every part resonates with others.
Okay.
So if you believe the universe is designed that way, it makes perfect sense to look for signs.
Yeah, right? You'd expect clues.
Clues from the divine or just from nature itself communicating through what you can see. The universe is this huge, meaningful text.
So it stems from that deep worldview. And the document, it stresses this didn't just appear. It talks about ancient whispers.
Intuitive murmurs. I
Yeah.
like that phrasing.
Yeah.
It suggests it probably started really simply, just observations that felt right.
Like the example in the source.
Exactly. Seeing a plant with, say, bright red sap.
Ah, right.
Thinking, well, red blood, maybe this helps stop bleeding, that kind of direct visual link.
That feels very human, that way of connecting things visually.
It absolutely is. And these weren't like strict rules at first, just nascent seeds, the source calls them.
Little ideas scattered around.
Yeah, different cultures, probably just arising from people living closely with nature, needing to figure things out.
But those whispers didn't just fade away. The document traces how the idea found fertile ground later in the classical age.
Which makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Greek and Roman philosophers were already thinking deeply about cosmic order, harmony, how things fit together.
So this idea resonated with their existing framework.
It's slotted right in, yeah.
And then, moving forward to the medieval period,
Yeah.
it wasn't forgotten.
Not at all. It was carefully preserved and subtly nurtured.
How?
Our source highlights the role of monasteries, those meticulous transcriptions of medieval monks.
Ah, right. Preserving knowledge.
Crucial centers of learning. They copied texts on everything medicine, theology, natural history. So these ideas about plant properties, signatures, they were kept alive, studied, woven into the existing knowledge.
Even if maybe not front and center yet.
Perhaps not challenging the main doctrines, but definitely there, being considered.
Okay, then the Renaissance hits. And the source says things changed dramatically. The idea erupted into roaring declarations.
Big shift, yeah. It bursts out.
Uh-huh.
It stops being just, quiet folk knowledge or something preserved in texts. A much more formalized, articulated system. And it gets champions, scholars, thinkers of the time really promoting it.
So they weren't just noticing things anymore. They were building a whole structure around it.
Exactly. And the document describes this Renaissance view very clearly. Nature, seen as a book, legible through its forms and properties.
Legible. I like that. Like you could read it directly.
That was the core idea. If nature's a book, its features are meaningful text. A heart-shaped leaf.
Must be good for the heart.
That was the thinking. Or lungwort with its spotted leaves.
Looking like lungs.
Precisely. So good for lung ailments. It became this really comprehensive way to interpret everything.
And the document points out, our goal here is to look at how its proponents, the key figures, really embrace this, how they interpreted it, how they spread it.
Through their writings, yeah. And importantly, through illustrations, too. Detailed drawings became crucial.
To show the signatures clearly.
Yes. And in their whole approach to studying nature, they weren't passive believers. They were actively documenting and disseminating this framework.
It's interesting, though. You said detailed illustrations. Did formalizing it push them to look closer at nature?
That's a key point our source implies. To read this book of nature, you had to examine its words, the fine details of plants, minerals, very carefully.
So even if we see the interpretation as, well, non-scientific now,
Right, it might seem mystical.
the act of looking closely was important.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
That intense observation it encouraged, that was actually a vital step towards developing more rigorous scientific methods later on. It fostered a deep engagement with the physical world, even if the why was different.
That's a fascinating angle. So something we've moved past still contributed to how we study things now.
It played its part in the story.
Looking at this whole sweep, it really is quite a journey from just a mere suggestion, these early intuitive feelings,
Yeah.
to becoming this pervasive, influential framework, something that genuinely guided healers and thinkers for centuries.
It really shows that fundamental human urge, doesn't it?
Yeah.
To find meaning, to see patterns,
To find purpose everywhere.
even in what might seem like random details. It speaks to our deep-seated desire for a world that makes sense, that's comprehensible.
Yeah, that innate need to connect the dots really shines through.
It does. And our document makes the point that, whatever its eventual limitations, this doctrine actually shaped the very trajectory of early modern science.
How so?
By pushing that close observation, that cataloging of nature's details, even as it was eventually superseded by other explanations, it left its mark.
Okay, so to help us really get a feel for this kind of historical evolution, how an idea can change shape over time, the source uses this analogy. It calls it the dragon trial.
Right, it's a thought experiment.
Hmm.
Think about some really ancient practice or invention, something we still have today, but with a super long history.
Right?
Oh, making bread,
Yeah.
or pottery, weaving, even storytelling, things humans have done for ages.
Got it. So take bread making. The exercise is to picture its earliest forms. What did that even look like?
Probably grinding grain between stones, mixing with water, maybe baking on hot rocks or in ashes. Very basic tools, basic materials.
Right. And then trace it forward. How did it change through, say, ancient Egypt, the Middle Ages, the early modern period, up to now?
You see huge changes in methods, right? Water mills, windmills for grinding flour, different kinds of ovens, yeast cultivation, industrial production eventually, new ingredients, new techniques, constantly added.
Okay, I see the evolution in methods, but the core question the source poses is,
How did the fundamental purpose stay the same? Even while the outward form, the methods, changed so dramatically.
with bread, the purpose is still taking grain and making it into nourishing food, right? Whether it's a flatbread cooked on a stone or a sliced loaf from a factory.
Exactly. The fundamental purpose persists through all those transformations.
Okay, so relating that back to the doctrine of signatures.
It helps us see it in the same light. That underlying human impulse to find meaning in nature, to look for clues about how things work, how they might be useful. That impulse is like the core purpose of making bread. It stays constant,
But the way we express that impulse changes.
dramatically.
Yeah.
The framework we use, whether it's looking for visual signatures or later doing chemical analysis, running controlled experiments, that's the method, and it evolves.
And its scientific standing changes too.
Completely. So the doctrine of signatures wasn't just some weird blip. It was a major phase in how humanity tried to express that enduring quest for understanding the world.
A key chapter in that long story of figuring things out.
Precisely.
So, stepping back then, thinking about this whole historical deep dive, what does understanding the doctrine of signatures mean for us, for you listening today?
Well, I think it gives crucial context, doesn't it? It helps us appreciate just how differently people in the past approached understanding the world.
It's not just about they were wrong, we are right.
Not at all. It shows the origins of certain beliefs about nature, about healing, and it reveals the, well, sometimes surprising path that early scientific and philosophical thought took to get us where we are now. It wasn't always a straight line.
And maybe on a broader level, it just highlights something fundamental about us.
I think so. That deep-seated human curiosity, that drive to find patterns, to make connections, to seek meaning in what we see around us.
That seems to be a constant thread.
It really does. Even as our tools, our knowledge, our whole way of interpreting the world changes fundamentally, that core impulse to make sense of it all, it seems deeply wired into us.
It underlines that ongoing search for intelligibility, for understanding our place.
A search that just continues, using different maps and tools now.
So we followed this serpentine path, as the source calls it, of the doctrine of signatures, from those first ancient whispers, those intuitive links.
All the way to that confident Renaissance roar, where it became this elaborate system.
Seeing how, for centuries, people genuinely tried to read nature like a book, looking for those visible signs.
And it wasn't just a fleeting fancy. it was a serious framework, you know?
Uh,
It really did shape how healers, thinkers, observers interacted with the natural world for a very long time. It left a definite mark.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought, something for you to maybe reflect on as you go about your day.
Yeah.
If people once saw nature as this book full of signs waiting to be decoded, how do you today read the world around you? What patterns do you find yourself looking for, maybe unconsciously? Where do you find meaning or connection or just simple fascination in the everyday stuff you encounter?